Mr. Speaker.
Order. Questions for oral answer. Dr. Lim Wee Kia.
Question 1, sir.
Mr. Speaker, before I begin, may I just wish you a happy birthday? I understand it's your birthday today. So, Speaker, may I answer question 1 and 2 together?
Of course.
MOH is continually reviewing and enhancing our anti-smoking measures. This includes studying international practices and ideas on how to further reduce smoking prevalence. New Zealand has introduced legislation to implement a tobacco cohort ban. It has, however, not banned vaping, unlike Singapore. We will study further on whether New Zealand's implementation approach is feasible in Singapore, as the implementation of the ban in New Zealand will be limited to retail sale to affected cohorts. Therefore, affected cohorts will still be able to smoke cigarettes that are supplied by their peers or others who are not from the affected cohorts. The tobacco-free generation policy in New Zealand will have a longer-term goal of denormalizing smoking rather than completely curbing access to tobacco products in the short term. Nevertheless, it is an interesting policy move that is worth studying further to see if it is appropriate and effective in Singapore's context.
Dr. Lim Wee Kia.
Thank you. I have one SQ. It's not just New Zealand, even Malaysia is looking at this. Question now is that apart from doing a generation ban, currently now we have moved up the age limit to 21. Is the MOH considering moving the age limit even higher?
Actually, besides New Zealand, I believe Denmark, Malaysia and UK have also announced their intent to introduce and implement this policy, but there are no details yet on these countries' legislation or timeline for implementation. But as Dr. Lim Wee Kia rightly pointed out, it's not that we are not doing anything. There's a lot of other things, including legislation and all that. All these we have to look at in concurrently and see what are the impact it has made over the past few years. And in respect of that particular issue, it is something that we will constantly review to see what is the effectiveness of doing so in light of all the different measures that we have already in place.
Mr. Liang Eng Hua.
Mr. Speaker, so this idea of the cohort ban has been talked about for some time, and I can understand that the government will have to be very careful in deliberating, and it may take a while. But we also know the ill effects of smoking and the second-hand smoke is without doubt indisputable. Why we should really curb smoking, second-hand smokes. So I want to ask the senior pastor why this hesitation is still there, and what can be the downside to having this cohort ban. And now that we have been pushing for the healthy SG, wouldn't MOH see this as a longer-term healthy SG, so that there's this structural shift towards better public health for public and for individuals as well?
Thank you for the question. As mentioned, we're not closing our minds to this. In fact, we are reviewing it, but we're also learning to see how it is going to be effective in our context. Because for a ban to be completely effective at curbing access to tobacco products for the affected cohorts, you need to introduce laws to penalise older persons who are not subject to the ban, but they may be abetting and actually supplying the products. And at this juncture, if you're looking at New Zealand, they're actually not banning vaping, and we are actually having a certain strong position on vaping because we know that that is a start to a lot of this addiction to tobacco. So we are not closing the doors to this. We have already in place many measures in place, but as with everything, we want to make sure that it is effective because it's also the implementation, it is also the resources that we have to put in. We must make sure that whatever we do generates the outcome that we desire, and we're not just paying lip service to it. So I think that's where the effort is being put at now, really to see in conjunction with all the things that's already been in place, how effective can this be, and how can we tweak it to suit the purposes that we need at this juncture.
So Dennis Tan.
Thank you, Speaker. Could I ask Senior Pausat one question? Is the government setting itself any timeline to review this? Because even as the other honourable member, Mr. Lim, has mentioned that other countries are really looking into it and express intention to introduce. So is the government setting any timeline to review this prospect of having a generational ban? Thank you.
I can assure the member that these issues are live. We constantly look into it, and as Mr. Liang alluded to, we are rolling out Healthier SG, and different components of Healthier SG are things that we are constantly looking at. These are things that is actually currently being reviewed actually as we speak. We have already announced it's going to be a campaign on vaping coming up the first part of this year. So I think everything's actually running according to timeline. We do need to see in as far as what happens in other countries. That depends on what the outcomes there is. But as it stands, we are already constantly reviewing. We're all constantly taking in feedback from partners that we're working with to see how best we can implement this.